Donkey Kong Bananza is the new flagship 3D platformer of the Switch 2, and my gosh, this game is taking the internet by storm. Since the initial trailer back in April, the goal has been clear: destroy everything in sight. Destruction is simply the name of the game, with the player being allowed to tear apart each level to its core. So naturally, I decided to find out, is it possible to beat Donkey Kong Bananza without punching? That does not count, and anything that's required while in a cutscene won't count for this challenge either, just like how this jump in Mario Odyssey isn't officially counted as a jump by the game. Simply, any punches thrown while I have full control of the character is what will count. Like normal on this channel, this question seems to ask the impossible, but I want to try it anyway. This was also my very first time playing the game on launch day, so there was a bit of a learning curve. And right away, we hit our very first obstacle. Unlike Power Moons, touching Bananium gems isn't enough to collect them. DK must break them with 3 attacks. Yeah, I was serious about how much destruction is the centerpiece of this game. Testing out some of DK's moveset, I wasn't really able to find a solution to this right away, as throwing chunks didn't do damage to the gems, and swinging the chunks felt like cheating since it was using the same button as a punch. But then I came across a revelation. The grab in this game starts to break off terrain right away, so I decided to try grabbing the banana, and somehow an attempted grab does do damage, meaning with 3 grabs, we've collected our first Bananium gem. Normally with terrains like this, DK is just rejected of the grab attempt, but for some reason it works on bananas, which is awesome news for us. I'm going to attempt to use this move as little as I can, since the move is somewhat similar to a punch, but it's good to know that the grab technically deals a small amount of damage. After playing through the tutorial area, Ingot Isle, and some of Lagoon Lair, I actually found an even better alternative, one that is undoubtedly not a punch: the roll. When lined up at the right angle, rolls will do damage to bananas and enemies, meaning it's something we're going to use a ton in this challenge. Now, I was thinking of this run as a similar challenge to the Mario Odyssey No Jump challenge, assuming the game would count any presses of the Y, B, and X buttons as punches, and was hoping for a tracker like that game has for jumps and cap throws. Unfortunately, this type of tracker doesn't exist, at least to my knowledge. And the reason I bring this up is because of this situation right here. The game forces us to use Y to place the ancient record, but I'm gonna say this doesn't count since it's simply not a punch. That means we're able to access and beat the Kong Bananza tutorial by simply jumping over the concrete instead of punching it, which ultimately leads us to our first boss of the game, Pika Bruiser. The fight isn't particularly difficult once you know what you're trying to accomplish, and they even supply us with a couple boulders of Boom Rock to do most of the damage for us. We can do the rest of the damage by rolling, meaning that both Ingot Isle and Lagoon Lair are definitely possible to beat without punching. Hilltop Lair is empty of any difficult fights, but does introduce the main NPCs of the game, Fractones. I love these little guys, and they show up all throughout the game in many different forms, including this Giraffe Tone at our next stop, Canyon Lair. This layer is more of the same, hopping from sub-layer to sub-layer and taking on a final boss. This time it's Stompin' Clomper. It's again a game of wait, roll, and repeat, and as you can see, that's a good amount of this challenge in the early game. So I'm not going to necessarily mention every mini-boss or obstacle unless it introduces something new or is particularly difficult to accomplish. I do want to be able to give my unique perspective on some of the aspects of DK Bananza in general, so I'll take a moment now to give my first bit of insight. Going into playing Bananza, I've only actually completed one 3D platformer in my life, that being Super Mario Odyssey. I have open-endedly played Sunshine, Galaxy, and 64, but haven't completed them. I'm not someone you would call particularly good at games, and I typically don't know speedrun tech or anything like it. I hardly ever utilize a full moveset, but this challenge has forced me to do just that. And trust me when I say, the movement in this game feels absolutely elite. Rolling, climbing, tearing, and surfing provide so much entertainment value on its own just traversing the worlds. Combine that with the sheer size and different landscapes, yeah, this game is a platforming gamer's dream. After departing the canyon, we arrive at one of my personal favorite layers, the Divide. I just love the vibe of this area. The calming nature and clean layout, and these terrain shifting blocks are probably one of my favorite underused elements in the entire game. This area also serves as our split path option between Freezer and Jungle Layer, and I chose the former. Both areas provide new Bananza forms, the Freezer offering the Zebra transformation. It always amazes me how Nintendo is able to create these thematic worlds that reuse the same base idea, but they all have a unique flair. Like Snow Kingdom in Odyssey is completely distinct from the Freezer layer, which is themed around frozen treats like ice cream. But the further you travel down, the area turns into a fire and ice theme with molten chocolate acting as lava. I guess right now is also a good time to explain the main antagonists of the game, Void Company, as we face off directly with Poppy Kong for the first time about halfway through this layer. This brand new trio of evil monkeys is led by Void Kong, joined by Grumpy and Poppy. Their goal is to get to the Banandium root, which is at the planet core. This happens to be the goal for DK and Pauline as well, as it grants any wish to its holder. For our protagonists, their wishes are to return to the surface and, of course, bananas. It's really nice to see Nintendo bring in new main antagonists, and honestly, they all have unique personalities. Poppy is an elegant Kong who is just there to benefit from reaching the root. Her main gimmick in fights is her invisible perfume, but ultimately this first fight is a breeze, once again utilizing rolls and grabs. We continue to traverse the hot and cold terrain before reaching the second and final boss of the Freezer layer, Inflaminite. This is the token boss that requires our new Bananza form, and it is one of my favorite fights in the whole game. This is the first time I was fluently switching between regular DK and a Bananza form, and the tech involved was so fluid. I expected that we were about halfway through the game at this point. I was absolutely wrong, but at the time I was feeling great about our chances to finish this challenge. And the jungle layer to follow didn't change that fact. This layer acts as almost an expanded Lost Kingdom from Odyssey. Poison water all around, and I mean, these are Klepto's ancestors, right? Another layer and another Bananza form unlocked. This time it was the ostrich. A bit deeper into the layer, this area right here is honestly the first real annoyance I'd run up against in a long time. These thorns are breakable in an instant using that button, but that requires a down punch, meaning I had to use projectiles to carve my path through the thorns. And this process would unlock the Abracadabra boss fight, which I then died in and had to redo the entire carving process again. The fight wasn't extremely hard, so I was able to beat it on the next time around, but I figured it was worth noting that this area is my first time I really felt hindered so far without punches. We head back to the Divide and confront Void Kong for the first time, who runs off two previous layers, and we follow. This sets off a couple of battles with the man himself through Hilltop, Lagoon, and circling back to the Divide. All the fights function the same, with Void Kong hovering in his banana, spawning in projectiles and enemies. These fights are almost laughably easy, with DK's range on projectiles himself. You're only required to take about half of his health away as well, making this little goose chase only take a few minutes before Void runs off again. That leads us to the resort layer, which is definitely the shortest actual map in the whole game. It does introduce Rainbow Rock, which is a cool concept. When you grab a chunk, it lifts you into the sky, dissolving along the way. Unfortunately, I really like this area, but it's a super simple task to move forward. Channel our inner Ross Chastain and break that giant melon. Now, I was a bit concerned when I reached the top and saw another dive punch button, but I decided to try digging through the melon to see where it would lead us, and that was a perfect plan. It took us a long time and a lot of strange camera angles, but we reached the stake and quickly moved on from the resort. Now, I'd seen on the skill tree that there was one more Bananza form. My guess was Crocodile due to the constant presence of these croc skeleton enemies in most areas. However, once I landed in the Tempest area, I came to a realization. For the second time in 3 years, Nintendo was turning a main protagonist into an elephant. Gosh, I hope this doesn't spawn more art. But in all seriousness, I really like this area. It's shrouded in thunderstorms, but you end up traveling in and out of an underground cave to retrieve the ancient record pieces. Watching this back, I know this area underground probably seems quite similar to other layers we visited. Namely, it's the second layer to feature lava, but playing it live, none of it feels the same. They throw different platforming at you, as well as brand new enemies and obstacles throughout. We face off against the sinister Blusterwing for the first of multiple fights. This one is fairly simple, and we defeat them without much issue, and they take off to the next sublayer, which is when I came to a crossroads. We had to follow the Blusterwing down the hole, but due to this airstream it left behind, I didn't know what to do. I exhausted all of my options. Grabbing, rolling, attempted clips, throwing objects into it, nothing worked. The only option remaining was a dive punch. Meaning officially, it is not possible to beat Donkey Kong Bananza without punching. But that's not where this challenge is going to end. I was over 8 hours into this thing, so I stuck it out to find out what is the minimum amount of punches we can throw while still beating the game. So I'll keep you guys updated. Right now we are at 1 required punch. So after that devastation, we finished gathering the record pieces, allowing us to unlock the Elephant Bananza, which is able to vacuum up terrain and form projectiles, or just clear your path forward. I think this is also my favorite Bananza design. The yellow and black always looks great, but the detailing down the trunk paired with the banana tusks, chef's kiss. We meet up with the Blusterwing again, mostly repeating the same fight but utilizing the Elephant Bananza. Unfortunately, when it runs away again, we are required to dive punch again. Our second required punch of the challenge, both at the hands of the Blusterwing. In our third and final matchup with the bird, you guessed it, a third required dive punch. I'm convinced the Blusterwing was here to ruin my life specifically. All jokes aside, I really loved the Tempest layer. The rain aesthetic was cozy yet threatening. It was also fun to mix in some lava, and there was even lava rain leaking from a higher layer. Super cool area, and I honestly wish it was a bit longer. And from one end of the spectrum to the other, my least favorite layer is up next, the landfill layer. Now, I'm not sure if this would necessarily be my obvious number 1 least like layer if I wasn't doing this challenge, but gosh, this was a mess to travel through. It was bad enough having to dig through the melon without a down punch, but a whole area? Yikes. Since I was digging through soft terrain, this was miserable. Throwing a chunk down would just refill the hole I just made. I had to just spam a mix of roll and grab and just pray that we made our way through. And it's made even worse when I run into these guys who I'm going to call Pikas. I don't know what their real name is. After landing in Trashtopia, I realized something really bad. We were about to face the Pika Bruiser. With no boom rock this time around, I had a really bad feeling about this. I tried many times, but I somehow just had realized that even after dealing damage, at the end of an attack cycle, the Bruiser calls back all of the Pika spam and heals itself back to full. And for the first time in this challenge, it was starting to sink in. The lesser damage of the grab was simply not fast enough to defeat the Bruiser. So, yeah, here's just the whole fight. Editing Hershey here. I want to mention that it's now been a week since the game's release, and obviously that means there's a bunch of new tech that's been discovered. I'm going to be showcasing a mix of myself and a couple speedrunners in these small updates, and I'll keep the counter updated to show the new optimized count as well as my current count in the game. Going into this fight, the optimal number is still 3, all from Blusterwing. So in my first initial run of this boss, I did throw a good amount of punches to complete the first phase before using grab to deal all of the final phase of damage. The speedrun of this fight uses the Elephant Bananza to make the first phase look like a complete joke. So with that strategy, Pika Bruiser is officially possible with 0 punches. The racing layer I'm sure is fun for DK fanatics, with Diddy and Dixie Kong appearing and spilling some lore, but this is the first DK game I've ever played, so it was the Ramby Rumble and out for me. Another super cool layer is up next, Radiance Layer. It's so interesting how the devs paired up animals with certain themes. I mean, an artistic snake whose area is centered around light? What is this? But somehow it works. The utilization of light in this area is so special. I particularly love this sub-area and how tight the timer is. It's an awesome idea and truly challenging. I was also shocked to see that the game had duped me, leaving the final Bananza upgrades off the initial skill tree, the Snake Bananza. Which leads into our next fight with Poppy Kong. She's got an upgraded perfume and moves much faster, forcing us to use our new glare ability, which slows down time. This will not count as punches even though we're using the Y button. And after we defeat her, she just quits Void Company. I thought this was the end of the Radiant Slayer, but there's actually an entirely new area to be explored. It's a snow area, but once again it's focused on light puzzles and is wrapped up with a very creative boss fight against Grumpy Kong. Using the Snake Bananza, we break holes into the ceiling to expose Grumpy's invention to light, making it vulnerable to damage. Finally, we get through a layer without throwing a punch. Following the fight, we head into what I thought was an endgame arc where Pauline is eaten by an eel and DK is thrown into jail a la Mario Sunshine. The jail area is a refreshing feeling. With the lack of Pauline, we're back to the basics. We help free Poppy Kong from her cell and we're revealed to be in the Groove Layer. The entire quest here is to restore the music to the area. It's pretty repetitive, but not super long, and I like the vibe of the area, so it wasn't too much of a slog. After restoring the groove, the eel returns and we dive in to save Pauline, who had been turned back into Odd Rock. This small 80-second timed challenge is such a vibe, but unfortunately, it requires another dive punch, making our count 56. Next comes the Feast Layer, and this is where I realized that we're not endgame. It's still going. This layer has a similar vibe to Luncheon Kingdom, probably because of the pink and its focus on food, but it's when you look at these two side by side, wow, is Bananza a huge game compared to its predecessor. Luncheon was one of my favorites in Odyssey, so I'm down to explore another food-based level. However, this area quickly turns sour for this challenge. After beating the Mad Mixer again, somewhat of a rehash of the Bowser Jr. fights in Sunshine, we're tasked with hitting 5 burger switches. I also want to give a shout out to the kitchen area here. The goop melting metal makes for some fun strategy, even if it's home to the easiest boss in the entire game. That boss leads into what is certain to be the endgame area, the Forbidden Layer. This is honestly a hilarious place. All the fractones are so short and frankly just over everything. They're constantly warning us to leave and go home. They hate us. It's so funny in comparison to the normal fractones who are so loving and welcoming. These giant Securitones turn us away, unless we pay up, creating this really cool section that creates terrain trails from thrown objects. We traverse those sections until we're met by another Securitone. In need of a few thousand gold, I had to backtrack and decided to head to a layer I basically skipped, the Racing Layer. And, well, that was a great decision, because that giant trophy is made of pure gold, and Elephant Bananza made quick work of our gold grinding. But, of course, we are just short of another Securitone's fee, so finally, we can move. Oh, really? 10,000 gold? Now we can move on. And we finally reach the Banandium route. Obviously, this is the site of our final fight with Void. This fight is really fun, and I see some insane speedrun potential here. It's tough, but also very optimizable. Hits to Void Kong in the first phase count by the Fists of DK or even any projectile making contact. And because of these sections that create trail, there are some insane snipes you can make in the first part of this fight. The second phase is not as fun, but we take out 1, 2, 3 Terravoiders before giving Void one last taste of DK's fist. Another big boss fight, completely possible to beat without punching. We get a super touching, Frozen-esque scene where Pauline sings to free DK of his rock form, but in doing so, she awakens the Banandium root. And I'm sure that was the reveal you were all waiting for. From his deep slumber, King K. Rool is back in action, and this game is not over yet. We continue to chase, now King K. Rool, into the real planet core, where we also see critters are now in place of those croc skeletons we've been fighting all game. This moment where we break through the layer here on the minecart is breathtaking. The core is so vibrant and feels so much more like a final area. There are a bunch of small islands we travel to, revisiting terrain and enemies we'd seen along our journey. This one, Critter Crevice, however, is actually relevant to this challenge. This area is filled with thorns, which is a soft terrain type. Unfortunately, since I had no idea what was waiting for me, I went down unprepared. The intended solution is to just use these dive punch buttons to break away the thorns, but I was still focused on punching as few times as possible. I tried using the Elephant Bananza to create projectiles, but the soft terrain just simply does no damage. I was able to damage boost through a couple of these spots, but ultimately I was forced to dive punch 7 times. Pause again. The world record speedrun does some really cool tech with the snake and ostrich bonanzas going up and around this area, but you actually can't do that without punching. A lot of the speedrun tech has to do with punching in the air. So what we're going to do is use the elephant bonanza to carve our way through, just like I mentioned earlier, but now that I know where I'm going, I can use that mixed with the ostrich bonanza to get down to the bottom while damage boosting through a little bit. So that leaves our optimized number still at 9. We're able to get back on track, beating K Stomp and Clomper with no flying fists. We then traverse several more areas before we run into another issue. This boulder being removed is required for progression, and the only way to move it is with a charge punch. This would lead us into the final boss, King K. Rool himself. I know I mentioned earlier that it's awesome to see Nintendo create a whole new set of main antagonists, and I do stand by that, but K. Rool showing up at the end of this game is amazing. Void Company's storyline is completely wrapped up at this point, and the twist reveal is done at the perfect time, just when you think it's over. I just like that they didn't cancel out Void entirely. It's not like he was working for K. Rool, he had no idea either. And this boss fight just feels more final than the one with Void. I did quickly realize that using charge punches on these big boulders was the only real way to damage the king. And down he fell. We'd finally claimed our wishes from the Bananium route, and with that, I can say with confidence, it took us 73 punches to beat Donkey Kong Bananza. Huh? This game is still going. K. Rool jolts back to life and chases down our protagonists, leading to one of my personal favorite fights in the game. The setting is just really epic, and it's such a different fight against the same boss we just fought. And after beating this version, we finally reach the surface and deliver Pauline back home to New Donk City. But what do you know? The croc has followed us all this way and floods the city with molten banana mush. There is a whole other layer yet again in this game. But this one certainly feels as final as can be, as we must use every Bananza form to parkour through the city. We're sadly forced to punch through 2 of the 3 sections of this climbing wall, as the molten mush is too quick to jump through them all. I tried. And I was wrong. Using the Snake Bananza, it's totally possible to make it up this wall using only jumps. And this here is a required charge punch. Wow, I am just full of Frostroad and Freezing Cold takes here. Thanks to the speedrun, I learned that even though you're camera locked, you can just charge jump to the left with the snake and grab the wall here, skipping that entire lower section, saving another punch. One last layer to get through leads up to, I promise, our final boss of the game, K. Rool, King of Rot. And this boss fight is basically a refight of the first one with K. Rool we just did before, but upscaled a ton in difficulty. I particularly despise the wave of mush-spreading bombs that cover the entire floor if you're not quick enough to stop it by throwing gold. In this tough of a fight, I couldn't afford to deal damage slowly, or I risked dying just like I did in so many previous attempts. So I started to throw punches. To be specific, none of what I'm saying here matters at all. It is completely possible to do all of the melee damage using the grab, just like I did in the previous K. Rool fight. I don't know why I didn't do that initially. I'm going to count the 3 charge punches I threw, but I believe it's certainly possible to beat both K. Rool fights with no punches thrown. I'm just not a good enough player for that. meaning that with 3 charge punches added to the counter, we finished the fight, once and for all, defeating King K. Rool. This time, it's actually for real. We beat Donkey Kong Bananza, and while we didn't do it without throwing a punch, this challenge was super fun, and after revisiting a couple of tougher sections with the help of some speedrun clips, our optimized punch total is just 10. Hopefully you'll forgive my noob mentality and accept the 16 or 9 as the answer over the 125 punches I initially finished this challenge with. I'm not someone you would call particularly good at games. Yeah, I wasn't lying. I want to wrap this up by giving my overall thoughts on this game. For the first huge headliner 3D platformer that Nintendo has released since 2017, there were extremely big expectations for Bananza, and I've got to say, this game lived up to every single one of those expectations. It's truly an amazing gaming experience, and I'm sure I will find myself playing this game multiple times over. If you've been on the fence about buying a Switch 2, do it. This game alone is worth it. I hope you've enjoyed this challenge comboed with my initial thoughts of Donkey Kong Bananza. Let me know if there's anything else in this game you'd like to see. I am so down to do more content like this. But for now, this is Hershey, signing off. Thanks for watching.